we have with us Ms. Christen Goeken with her session Climate Change Mitigation through Aquatic Plants Goal 14. She is a third generation entrepreneur with a passion for innovation, energy, and sustainability. She has a technology with a focus on intelligent ecosystems that impact humanity and the environment. She currently serves as the Director of Sustainability at Go Green LED, a certified woman-owned smart city technology company, and is a co-founder of Opelus Labs, which designs custom technology solutions for global projects. She worked with the city of Aurora, the second largest city in the state of Illinois, to finalize and release their latest sustainability plan, which includes various innovative goals and initiatives for the city to implement between now through to the 2030. Thank you so much, Ms. Christen Goeken, for your over to you for your session, Climate Change Mitigation through Aquatic Plants, Goal 14. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It is such an honor to be here and to be included among such an inspirational group of people. I'm going to be talking about climate change mitigation through aquatic plants. Goal 14 and marine ecosystems have been a major passion of mine for as long as I can remember. I remember in 7th grade doing a science fair project on different methods that could be used to clean up oil spills and testing out a bunch of different displays with oil and water in plastic cases. And so the oceans and ocean conservation is a major passion of mine. And as I've seen so many amazing things in the field of sustainability emerge, one of the things that has constantly caught my attention has been the power of aquatic plants. I will be speaking specifically on kelp and mangroves for my aquatic species. I see our marine ecosystems as, while being one of the most vulnerable ecosystems on our planet to the effects of climate change, they're also our greatest asset in mitigating climate change. Coastal ecosystems sequester a surprisingly large amount of carbon, and marine plants that contribute to this carbon sequestration, such as mangroves and kelp, they really do this through their soil. And when these plants die, their leaves, branches, and roots and stems get buried underwater in the soil. And because of the low oxygen concentration underwater, the plant materials can stay buried for long periods of time, which make them a wonderful place to store carbon. So kelp is an incredible species. It is a type of seaweed, and the ecologically restorative benefits of kelp and growing kelp are well documented. Kelp grows in the ocean and requires no land, fresh water, or fertilizer. In contrast, it takes 108 gallons of water to produce just 1 pound of corn and 216 gallons to produce 1 pint of soybeans. Kelp is nutrient-rich with high levels of potassium, magnesium, iron, and calcium. This makes it a wonderful contender to be included in the food sources that we use to help combat global hunger. It has an incredibly fast growth rate of up to 2 feet per day and exports a large portion of its biomass out into the deep sea, allowing kelp to permanently remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere is obviously a necessary role in preventing rising temperatures and future climate catastrophes. The carbon sequestration potential of kelp is what really makes it stand out to me. Kelp can sequester carbon up to 50 times faster than terrestrial forests, which makes it a very powerful tool, and faces a much lower risk of deforestation, which land forests experience very regularly. I will also be highlighting a few nonprofits that I feel are doing wonderful work in trying to combat climate change through marine species. And first, I will be talking about Native Conservancy. Native Conservancy is a nonprofit organization that started a program to empower and equip young Indigenous peoples with the resources and training to start their own kelp farms. The goal is threefold: creating economic opportunities, supporting the health of the ocean, and connecting people to a traditional food source. It is also the first Native-owned and Native-led land trust, which empowers Alaska Native peoples to permanently protect and preserve endangered habitats on their ancestral homelands. Since its founding, the Native Conservancy has worked with the Preservation Council to preserve more than 1 million acres of wild salmon habitat along the Gulf Coast of Alaska coastline. Many of the Native Conservancy's current projects work to build resiliency and food sovereignty by delivering traditional foods to elders, highlighting a portable freezer model in the community, and training kelp farmers. So their idea is to equip young Indigenous farmers with the skills and resources they need to successfully source, cultivate, and harvest and process and market kelp themselves. I think this is an amazing nonprofit, and I think that the work that they are doing is really powerful. Just in the work of carbon sequestration through kelp cultivation, there is a worry of marketing and harvesting kelp versus keeping kelp in the water to sequester carbon. While harvesting the kelp will create a great economic benefit to the communities that are growing it, and that's a major goal of Native Conservancy, they also have the goal of for every acre of kelp that they harvest, 1 acre of kelp will stay in the water year-round in order to sequester carbon long-term and support ocean health. They are looking also to create a 501c3 with regional tribes to push for policy that would potentially allow the communities to grow restorative kelp alongside commercial kelp. It's an amazing organization. And I thought that their process of harvesting and cultivating hemp is interesting. And so I'll share a little bit about what Native Conservancy's process looks like. The process of kelp cultivation begins with a Native Conservancy dive crew that sources specimens of fertile wild kelp, also known as sorus, to maintain genetic diversity within the crop. Then harvested sorus is brought to the Conservancy's partners at the Marine Institute. Here the spores are encouraged to settle onto spools of native string wrapped around large PVC pipes, and from there the kelp starts to grow. You can see the PVC pipes shown in this picture. The water is changed daily to support the young algae, and then after 6 to 8 weeks, when the algae is 2 to 3 centimeters long, it is transferred or outplanted onto offshore test lines accessible by boat. The kelp then grows to its full size in the open ocean. The Native Conservancy now grows kelp on 7 test sites covering 100 miles within Prince William Sound, Alaska. Over the past year, the organization successfully grew 4,000 pounds of ribbon, sugar, and even bull kelp, a very difficult species to cultivate. The team regularly measures salinity, pH, nutritional profiles, and growth profiles of the kelp. So really incredible organization. And if you want to find out more about what the work they're doing, you can visit nativeconservancy.org. Next powerful marine species I will be talking about is mangroves. Mangroves, I'll share this research first. According to a study published in Nature Geoscience, superpowered seaweeds could sequester around 173 million metric tons of carbon each year, which would equal about as much as the annual emissions of the state of New York. So I found this to just be an amazing kind of way to wrap your mind around carbon sequestration when it's compared to emissions of a specific waste rather than just metric tons without having a reference point. On to mangroves. Mangroves are a very, very powerful plant. Mangroves are an incredible climate change fighting plant. Their branches provide homes for lizards, snakes, and nesting birds, while their roots, when submerged, become protective nurseries for young fish and sanctuaries for marine mammals. Mangroves also provide a slew of benefits for coastal human communities. They act as storm barriers, protecting inland areas from flooding and erosion by dissipating the energy of large waves. They help filter river water of pollutants and trap excess sediment before it reaches the ocean. Their role as fish nurseries can have a big impact on local economies and food production, as they provide habitat for up to 80% of commercially and recreationally important fish species. They also provide privacy and shade for coastal property owners and prevent erosion and stabilize shorelines. The secret to their carbon storing success lies not in the plants themselves, but in the rich muck that they grow in. As marine plants grow and die, their leaves, roots, stems, and branches wind up buried in underwater sediments. These low oxygen sediments can store carbon for decades or longer. So the true benefit is through their anaerobic soil. One reason that coastal wetlands are particularly good at storing carbon is because their soils are largely anaerobic, meaning that they lack oxygen. In most coastal wetlands, there's usually a very thin layer of soil that is oxygenated and above water, but the remainder of the soil is submerged in water. Oxygen diffuses very slowly through the water, so saturated soil in these wetland habitats tends to have little to no oxygen present. Decomposition of organic plant material is much slower where there is no oxygen present, so the carbon present in this plant material remains intact, rather than being broken down by microbes and respired back to the atmosphere. As a result, wetlands are very good carbon sinks and thus need to be highly protected. The potential drivers of degradation and loss to coastal wetlands include population growth, economic activity, diversion of freshwater flows, conversion to other land uses, pollution, overharvesting, overexploitation, infrastructure development, land conversion, water withdrawal, nitrogen loading, and changes in water temperature, among other things. So some socioeconomic factors that reduce carbon storage capacity in mangroves include local management practices, anthropogenic forest degradation, and conversion of mangrove forests to aquaculture ponds for agriculture. When mangroves are replaced or removed, their carbon sequestration capacity is removed as well, while also increasing carbon emissions because the carbon is released from the places that it had been stored. This amplifies climate change impacts in areas that are already extremely vulnerable. In order to secure the carbon sequestering ecosystem services of mangrove forests, science-based management needs to become a major priority for coastal regions, and the existing protected areas networks need to be expanded to protect a greater network of mangrove forests. A nonprofit that I'll be highlighting that specializes in mangroves as well as other sustainability efforts is Worldview Impact. Worldview Impact Foundation is a nonprofit international organization with a mission to make an impact at the grassroots level to create positive change. Its objective is to create an enabling environment for local people to actively participate in an array of climate change mitigation and adaptation projects, such as carbon sequestration through reforestation and afforestation projects in both terrestrial and marine fragile ecosystems. I've had the pleasure of working directly with this organization, and it is led by Dr. Bremley Lingdo, which is an incredibly inspiring individual on the forefront of sustainability. And one thing that I really love is that they actively bring together donors and impact investors with projects seeking to find the resources for addressing climate change and sustainability. And they also advocate for youth involvement in climate action, which I think is an extremely important effort. Lastly, I will be talking about an innovation that I found to be very, very fascinating as I was conducting my research. This idea was proposed by UCLA, and it is on a carbon sequestration reactor that would sequester carbon through seawater. This proposed technology would incorporate a flow reactor, which is a system that continuously is fed raw materials and yields products. The seawater would flow through a mesh that allows an electrical charge to pass into the water, rendering it alkaline. This kicks off a set of chemical reactions that ultimately combine dissolved carbon dioxide with calcium and magnesium native to seawater, producing limestone and magnesite by a process similar to how seashells form. The seawater then that flows out would then be depleted of dissolved carbon and ready to take up more from the atmosphere. A co-product of the reaction, besides minerals, is hydrogen, which could then be used as a fuel. This method is considered single step, which would differentiate it from other concepts that require carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to undergo a multi-step concentration process before it can be stored. And while some plans propose storing captured carbon dioxide in geological formations, such as depleted natural oil and gas reservoirs, there's always a risk of leaks returning that carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere and creating more problems. By contrast, this method is meant to store carbon durably in the form of solid minerals, meaning rocks. So I think this is a really cool innovation, and I hope to see this develop more and see more exciting ideas like this one. In conclusion, I believe that we need more financial incentives and initiatives in place to protect these precious ecosystems and to incorporate them into the carbon market through the buying and selling of carbon offsets. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Ms. Christen, for that wonderful session. The work you are doing is amazing. And thank you so much for joining us today and inspiring us.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. And next,